The Mishkan, the portable sanctuary in the desert, referred to in English as the tabernacle, is discussed in this week's parsha of Terumah. And this parsha talks about the contributions for the Mishkan, and there were basically three metals. The Mishkan was made up of contributions of zahav, of gold, of kesef, of silver, and Heschel, copper. So the Midrash tells us that these three metals apply to three empires that subjugated the Jewish people. And this is based on a famous story in the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian monarch, dreamt of a huge statue consisting of four parts. The head consisted of fine gold. Its breast and arms were made out of silver. Its belly and thighs were made out of copper. And its legs were made out of iron. And Daniel was summoned to interpret the dream, and he explained that the head of the statue, the golden head, was a reference to the Babylonians. The silver breast and arms to the Medians, who were together with the Persians. The copper belly and thighs represented Greece. And the iron legs were a reference to the Romans. So then the question is, why over here in the Mishkan you only have gold, silver, and copper? If they refer to the kingdoms, you also have a fourth kingdom, the kingdom of Rome. So the Medrash explains, quote, because the evil Edom, which is Rome, which destroyed the holy temple, is likened to it, this is to teach you that the Holy One, blessed is He, will accept gifts in the future from all the kingdoms with the exception of Rome. So the Medrash asks, but what about Babylonia? Babylonia also destroyed the temple. And the answer is that Rome didn't just destroy the temple, it razed it. It destroyed its very foundation, as it says in Tehillim, in Psalms, Psalm 137. And the Medrash then describes how in the future, in the days of Moshiach, all the nations of the world will bring gifts to Moshiach, and he'll accept them with the exception of Rome, from whom he will not accept their gifts. And the Romans will come and argue, you accepted all these other nations' gifts. They're not your brothers, and yet we, which are your brothers, Rome originates with Esav, who was a brother of Yaakov. He says, why don't you want to accept our gift? And Rome then says, the Holy One, blessed be He, says to Moshiach, rebuke the wild beasts of the reed. He's referring, this is in the Psalm 68, he's referring to the Romans who are the beast of the reed. Their entire existence is from the reed. What exactly does this mean? The existence of Rome is from the reed. So this is based on a passage in the Talmud and the Zohar, that when King Solomon married the daughter of Pharaoh, the angel Gabriel came and stuck a reed in the sea, and the city of Rome was built on a sandbank that gathered around it. So let's understand, what does that mean that Rome was built on a reed? When Solomon married a daughter of Pharaoh, what does one thing have to do with the other? And why was God so upset at Rome more than any of the other nations? And what's the connection to a reed, that Rome was built on a reed? So to answer all these questions, we have to understand the role of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple. And in short, this is a very long discussion. In short, the whole purpose of God's creation was, as the Midrash says, to have a dwelling place in this physical world. He created a world with human beings who are independently minded. They can do whatever they want. They can choose to do right or wrong. And they, of their own volition, after they realize that God had created this world with that plan and He gave us the Torah to fulfill this plan, we, humanity, invite God into the world, and God's presence becomes the consciousness of the whole world. That is the Messianic age. But in order to accomplish that, God created a part of the world, the land of Israel, which has a special level of holiness. The word Eretz, Yisrael, translated as the land of Israel, the Midrash says, actually means the land that desires and runs to do God's will. It's a land that is very nature has its proclivity to do what God wants and to make God's plan come to fruition. And in the land of Israel itself, it's the holy temple, the Beis HaMikdash. Had we never compromised the integrity of the Beis HaMikdash, Jews would not have to travel to any other part of the world. They could all live in the land of Israel, and the holiness generated in the temple would spread to the whole world. Because we did not truly value the Beis HaMikdash, we compromised its integrity, we were forced to go into exile, but not as a punishment. Yes, it was a punishment, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is we no longer have that powerhouse, that generator of divinity, namely the Beis HaMikdash, that would spread godliness to the whole world without us being there. Now that we lost the Beis HaMikdash, we lost that concentrated, powerful energy source, we have to go to every part of the world, do mitzvahs wherever we are, in the United States, in Russia, wherever a Jew has ever traveled, we are there to bring godliness to those places. Had we not sinned and had the Beis HaMikdash, we would have been able to generate that holiness without having to go to all these places. And because we have to go to places in the diaspora that are so far removed from holiness, we have to go down to the lowest levels of humanity, of existence, in order to bring holiness to these places. That's the imagery of a reed. A reed is something that stands up and goes down low. The Hebrew word reed, kana, begins with the letter kuf. The letter kuf is like the letter hey, which is one of the letters of God's name, but its left leg goes down, all the way down. It means, it suggests the idea that we have to go down into the dumps in order to bring godliness to the whole world. That was not necessary, had not been necessary, if Solomon had not married the daughter of Pharaoh. What exactly was Solomon's rationale? Solomon was the wisest of all people. Solomon was a holy person. How could he think that marrying the daughter of Pharaoh would be a positive thing? Yes, he did convert her, Maimonides explains. But still, why would he try to marry the daughter of Pharaoh? And the answer is, King Solomon was of the mindset that in order to fulfill God's plan, it's not enough to have a Beis HaMikdash, the holy temple which he built, but you had to transfer the holiness to other nations. And by marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, he was cementing his relationship with the kingdom of Egypt, which is a very powerful force, and that would help spread godliness to the whole world. So Solomon had good intentions by doing that, but his mistake was, no, you don't have to marry the daughter of Pharaoh to bring the holiness to Pharaoh. It happens automatically by having the Beis HaMikdash and by respecting it and not compromising it. So as a result of King Solomon making that error, thinking that by marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, what that necessitated centuries later that we would have to go into exile, and that the exile would be a terrible exile because it would be generated by a force called Rome. That Rome was created, that means the potential for that exile was created by King Solomon marrying the daughter of Pharaoh, and the angel Gabriel had to create Rome by putting that reed. In other words, it symbolizes that it necessitated going deep down into the dumps in order to fulfill God's mission. Had he not done that, we would never have the Roman exile. And that's why God says, I don't want to accept the gifts from Rome. And Rome says, well, why not? Look what we did. We helped the Jewish people fulfill their purpose by bringing godliness all over the world. Because Rome is the nation that scattered Jews all over. And therefore we were able to bring holiness and godliness to every part of the world. So we fulfilled your purpose and we helped the Jewish people realize their purpose. And God says, no, that's similar to someone who throws a person into the sea and they're about to drown, and you jump in and you save them. You can't take credit for saving them. You threw them into the sea. You are the one who is responsible for their having to be in exile and their persecution and oppression and pain and suffering. Don't get credit for the fact that the Jews were able to take advantage of their being in exile to transform the world. That's why the Mishkan tabernacle was built with gold and silver and copper, even though these were also exiles, but they were not as comprehensive exiles. They didn't scatter the Jews to all four corners of the world, and therefore God says, I can't use Roman contribution, the iron, for the building of the Mishkan. Just one caveat over here. The Rabbi, in one of his talks, says something very startling, that the final Beis HaMikdash, even then, Rome will be transformed and will be rehabilitated, and there will be iron in the last Beis HaMikdash. May we see its rebuilding imminently.